Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission, as always, is pretty straightforward. Cut through the noise, get you the key insights on complex topics. We know you want the big picture without wading through tons of dense reports. So today, we're diving into a really significant shift happening in heavy machinery manufacturing. We're talking about moving beyond just, mountains of waste and inefficient resource use.
Exactly. We're looking at how a major global player is, well, fundamentally rethinking the way they build things, keeping the entire life cycle of their machines in mind.
And this isn't just a minor tweak, is it?
Oh, not at all. It's a deep shift in their whole philosophy, really. And what's driving it is fascinating. It's this mix of tougher environmental rules popping up everywhere.
Right, government's pushing for less waste, more sustainability.
Precisely. And coupled with that, the very real economic headache of raw material prices being all over the place, often climbing higher, it really built a strong case for doing things differently.
Makes sense. And the core of our chat today is based on this case study, implementing a closed-loop manufacturing system in heavy machinery, CMR. It came out April 7th, 2025. Now, CMR, maybe circular manufacturing report, certainly points to their strategy.
Seems likely.
The study details how this global manufacturer, and they've got contact listed in the US, the EU, suggesting a wide reach, adopted what they call a closed-loop manufacturing system.
Which basically means managing a product from the initial design idea all the way through its working life and then thinking about what happens at the very end.
Right. So our goal for you, listening in, is to really grasp the aha moments behind this big change and maybe some of the surprising facts about how they pull it off.
Okay, so let's start with the problems they were actually facing. Because, like I said, it wasn't just about being green, although that was part of it. Traditional heavy machinery, I mean, these things are huge, built with massive amounts of materials. It naturally generates a lot of waste.
Yeah, you can imagine. Tons of it.
And that means big disposal costs. Plus, the environmental impact of landfilling, all that industrial stuff.
And it wasn't only the waste at the end, right? What about building them in the first place?
Good point. They were hugely reliant on virgin materials, fresh metal straight from the mine, new plastics, everything made from scratch.
Which has its own environmental costs, the extraction, the processing.
Absolutely. And it also left them really exposed financially. Imagine a sudden spike in steel prices.
Ouch. Yeah, that could seriously hit their profits. This whole take, make, dispose way of doing things sounds pretty vulnerable, environmentally and economically.
It was, and they saw that. While being responsible environmentally was, definitely a factor, there was this powerful economic reason driving them towards something more circular. They figured out pretty proactively that manufacturing, especially in their industry, needed to be tougher, less reliant on stuff that runs out, and more stable financially.
Okay, so the why is clear. Big challenges, both green and financial. But the how, tackling something this huge, where did they even start?
Well, their first really clever move, and this is where you see the ingenuity, was focusing on design for disassembly and recyclability.
Sounds technical.
It does, but the idea is smart. They basically went back to square one with their designs. Instead of these massive, welded together things that are hard to deal with later, they started engineering machines with modular parts, standardized components.
Like building blocks.
Sort of, yeah. It's a fundamental shift. You're not just designing for one use anymore. You're designing for maybe 2-3 life cycles down the road. It changes everything.
In the knock-on effects of that.
Huge, modular, standard parts. It makes taking the machine apart for recycling way easier. But also think about maintenance during its life.
Oh, right. Repairs must be simpler.
Exactly. Need to replace one part. Just swap out the module. You don't have to scrap the whole machine nearly as often. Easier upgrades, too.
Okay, so if I were a customer, that means potentially lower maintenance bills, less time the machine is out of action. That's a direct benefit.
Definitely. And think about the recycling side again. Standard connections mean you don't need super complex energy-guzzling methods to separate materials later. It's designed to come apart.
They really thought it through from the start.
They did. And it wasn't just the physical design. The case study mentions detailed technical manuals, even digital tracking systems.
Why digital tracking?
So you know exactly what's in each component and how it was put together. Makes taking it apart and recovering the valuable materials much, much more efficient. It shows real long-term thinking.
Okay, design's one piece. What else? Materials must be a huge factor in heavy machinery.
Absolutely critical. So alongside the design changes, they pushed hard on using recycled and responsible materials. And this wasn't just, throwing in a bit of recycled plastic for show. These machines take a beating.
Yeah, the materials have to be tough.
Super tough. So they invested a lot in research, finding and testing alternatives, recycled metals, special alloys, even some new biodegradable composites that could meet those really high-performance standards.
So sustainability didn't mean weaker machines.
Not at all. That was non-negotiable. Performance and safety standards had to be identical to virgin materials. It meant serious R&D, rigorous testing.
And where did they get all this recycled material consistently?
Good question. They built long-term partnerships with suppliers, created a stable supply chain for these high-quality recycled inputs, making it cost-effective too.
And the payoff.
Big environmental win. Using more recycled stuff cuts down the impact of mining new materials, processing them. It lowers the carbon footprint for every single machine they make. That's a big deal today.
Definitely a selling point.
For sure. And building on that idea of keeping things useful for longer, they set up a really interesting remanufacturing and refurbishment program.
Giving old machines a second life.
Or even a third. They created systems to collect used machines, check them over thoroughly, fix up worn parts, and then put these remanufactured machines, or even just components, back onto the market.
How do they get the old machines back?
Clever part, a customer buyback program. They offered discounts on new or refurbished models if customers returned their old equipment.
Win-win then. Company gets the materials, customer saves some money.
Exactly. It's a neat way to actually close the loop. And like you asked about materials, quality was key here too. Remanufactured parts were tested like crazy to make sure they perform just like new ones.
So customers could trust them. They weren't just buying used goods.
Right. They likely had to be really transparent about the testing, the refurbishment process to build that confidence. It's about keeping the value in the system, not letting it become waste.
Okay, so design, materials, remanufacturing. What about inside their own factories? Did they tackle waste there too?
Oh, yes. Big time. They brought in advanced waste management and material recovery systems. And this was more than just better recycling bins.
How so?
The study mentions AI-driven robotic sorting. Think about factory waste. It's a complex mix of metals, plastics, composites.
Hard to sort manually, I bet.
Very, but these AI robots, they can identify and separate different materials super fast and accurately. The AI learns, adapts, gets better at spotting different stuff over time.
Wow, so they basically created their own internal recycling plant.
Pretty much. And once separated, those valuable materials go right back into their own supply chain. Less need for new resources again.
That's efficient.
And to make it even more efficient, they used smart sensors and monitoring systems all over their production lines.
Tracking everything in real time.
Yep. Exactly how much material was being used where, how much waste was being generated at each step. That data lets you pinpoint exactly where you can cut back even more. It's proactive reduction, not just cleanup.
Okay, that internal stuff is impressive.
Yep.
But they operate globally. How do they handle all the different rules and regulations everywhere?
Another crucial piece, navigating the regulatory landscape. Environmental rules are always changing, usually getting stricter. They decide not just to comply, but to get ahead of the curve.
Did they just hire more lawyers?
Maybe some. But mostly, they actively worked with government agencies, sustainability groups, industry organizations.
Why collaborate?
It wasn't just about ticking boxes. It gave them access to things like sustainability certifications, maybe even grants or incentives. It showed they were serious, built credibility, and they learned about best practices.
And they participated in industry forums, too, you said.
Right. Sharing what they learned, the challenges, the solutions, that helps lift the whole industry. Plus, being in those discussions lets them understand, maybe even influence, where future rules are heading. Keeps them prepared.
Okay, so we've got the strategies. Design, materials, remanufacturing, internal waste, navigating regulations. That's a lot. Did it actually work? What did the numbers say?
This is where it gets really compelling. The proof is in the numbers, as they say. The case study reports some pretty amazing results. Within just 3 years.
3 years. That's fast for this scale.
Isn't it? They saw a 40% drop in raw material use. 40%. And cut their total waste generation by half, 50%?
Wow. 40 and 50%. Those aren't small changes.
Not at all. And think what that means. Less raw material needed, big cost savings, half the waste, huge drop in disposal costs. It clearly shows sustainability and profit can absolutely go together.
I guess there must have been upfront costs, though. New tech, R&D.
Oh, undoubtedly.
Well,
Investment in the research, the robots, the redesigns. That wouldn't have been cheap initially, but the savings clearly outweighed those costs over time.
and the environmental impact beyond just waste.
They looked at that too. A life cycle analysis and carbon footprint assessment found a 30% decrease in greenhouse gas emissions for each machine produced.
30% lower carbon footprint per machine. That's significant.
Very. It proves the whole approach works environmentally, too. Smarter material choices, better processes. It adds up to real climate benefits.
What about the customers? Do they like these new sustainable machines?
Seems so. Customer adoption and satisfaction surveys showed a strong preference emerging for durable, sustainable gear. Machines that last longer need less maintenance.
And were customers actually willing to send back old machines for the buyback?
Yeah, the surveys indicated real willingness to participate in the buyback and refurbishment programs. It suggests the market itself is shifting, demanding these kinds of circular solutions.
Okay, so let's talk tangible achievements. What were the big wins for the company overall?
Well, the cost savings alone were huge. A reported 25% cut in overall production costs. That came directly from remanufacturing and getting materials back efficiently.
25% reduction in production costs. That's massive for a heavy manufacturer.
It really is. Plus, remember the modular design. That also lowered maintenance costs for their customers, so it created value all around.
And beyond the money.
They definitely established themselves as a market leader in sustainable manufacturing. Being early and showing these results gave them a real competitive edge.
Attracting green-minded customers and investors.
Exactly. Better brand reputation thanks to certifications, new strategic partnerships. It solidified their top position.
And the regulatory side. Being proactive paid off.
Absolutely. Regulatory compliance and risk mitigation. By getting ahead of the standards, they avoided potential fines down the line. They basically became a model for the industry, potentially shaping future policy. It builds resilience for the long haul.
It really sounds like a case study in how being green isn't just, a nice extra, but smart business.
That's the core message, I think. It wasn't just about stewardship, though that was there. It was fundamentally about innovation, efficiency, market leadership, and long-term success.
Okay, let's try and wrap this up for everyone listening. The big takeaways seem clear. This company went all in on a closed-loop system, completely changing how they operate.
Right, a comprehensive overhaul.
And the results were, frankly, pretty staggering. The scale of material savings, cost reductions, huge.
And achieved surprisingly quickly, too.
Yeah. And importantly, customers were on board, showing there's real market demand for this. They ended up not just greener, but smarter, more efficient, and stronger financially.
Exactly. It wasn't just virtue signaling. It was good strategy, making them more resilient to resource issues, cutting costs, and giving the market what it's starting to demand.
So maybe a final thought for our listeners to chew on. How could these ideas, these closed-loop principles, apply elsewhere? Maybe in industries or even just, smaller scale in your own life or work. Thinking about product life cycles differently, how we use materials. Could we cut waste and consumption drastically by adopting some of this thinking?
It's a great question. This one company's story really shows the potential when you shift towards a more circular economy. What other sectors are ready for this kind of shakeup?
It definitely feels like this case study gives a practical roadmap. And our chat today, well, it really just scratches the surface of this whole trend, doesn't it?
It does. There's a lot more to explore there.
Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Hope it's given you some valuable things to think about. Until next time.